I was scared too. What was going to happen to me? What if I lost my job? As a single parent, how would I provide for my children? Thankfully, that's when I began to learn about Tom DeVore. I had a few teachers from Springfield on board, but we needed an attorney. We needed Tom. I knew Tom was the only attorney who had what it took to fight this fight. At this time, teachers and parents all over the state were scrambling. I reached out to Tom, and over the next few weeks, my teacher friends and I became plaintiffs in the teacher case. Being a plaintiff meant we were suing the Illinois Department of Public Health, Illinois State Board of Education, our own school districts, and Governor Pritzker. That's a lot to wrap your head around as a usually mild-mannered, rule-following teacher. Being part of the teacher case has been an amazing experience. I've gained confidence that I didn't know existed. I didn't just talk the talk, I walked the walk, and we won. Thank you to Tom DeVore.
And I'm used to people, giving up the mic that quickly. Kate Allen, come on up and speak. You're brave for a kid.
Go!
Come on, Kate. Give a round of applause.
Hi, my name is Kate Allen, and I just want to thank everyone who has been fighting for our rights. I've been wearing the mask for over a year now, and then when my mom said, "You don't have to wear it anymore," I was so excited. But then I was like, what will people think? I was at school. Everyone started taking their masks off after they saw one person. Then there's 3, then there's 5, then there's all of the class. It's just a great experience. And then, then I just realized how differently people get treated about wearing a mask. One time my mom was in the store, and just because she didn't have her mask on, the lady wouldn't talk to her about anything. She asked her, "How was your day?" She only talked business. And that's just pretty sad to know that people are that way. And then last year, as my teacher, Miss Throckmorton, she was like really into the mask. We had plexiglass on our desk. And then this year, before we got to not wear the mask, it was like she was still picking on me for not wearing it, even though she's not my teacher. I'm like, what the heck? I tell my mom. She's like, I don't think you're going to be wearing it anymore. And then in the lunchroom, I look at her. You can just see the first day she's got a bad look on her face. I'm like, I can see why. And I just want to thank all of you for listening to me and appreciating what I said. Thank you.
Good job. When you think about what's happening with the COVID at its onset, how many of you know and realize? I'll tell you, Dad Bongino, I'll step in here for a minute. How many of you guys know and realize? You look like Dad Bongino, man. Yeah, you. Yeah. But how many of you guys know that there were more school-aged kids killed in the streets of Chicago that have died from COVID? How many people know that? Nationwide? Yeah, nationwide. How many of you know that there were more kids who committed suicide during the COVID crisis than the kids that have died from COVID? Priorities. This is probably the change in leadership, not just here in the state, but across this country, where these people made these decisions that affected our kids in ways that we'll never understand. And I'm telling you right now, everywhere I go, I talk about this because it's something that's real near and dear to me. Because these leaders, you guys, don't ever let them forget what they did to you. Ever. Oh, I'm sorry. It's quiet down there. Ryan, you want to speak? You want to speak, Ryan? Your name's on here, Ryan. Are you coming up to speak, Ryan? We'll wait on Ryan. Let's go with Grace. I got it. All right. I didn't want to butcher it. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Grace. Can you hear me okay? The microphone's new, so you have to give me a second on this. I'm a senior at Effingham High School. I participate in softball in the spring, and I'm on our team, our trap and skeet team at Effingham, which is something that's up and coming there. So if you don't know what that is, it's a pretty cool sport. You should check it out. Here we go. So, Friday, March 13th, 2020. A day that kids my age, especially our sport athletes, will never forget. What was supposed just to be a normal Friday at school with the usual test on Tuesday or this paper's due Monday ended a lot differently than it began. At practice that evening, I was given the news that we would be off 2 weeks of school, which was pretty cool. I liked the thought of that. Well, it was for the first 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks turned into 4, and then soon 2 months, and before I knew it, our seniors were graduating in the most odd way we had ever seen. I was lucky enough to help with that graduation ceremony and get to wish them a happy graduation, but many of their families had to do it virtually. At that time, nobody knew what the future academic careers would look like. The summer of 2020 was normal to me. I played my usual 75 softball games all over the Midwest and even traveled to Gulf Shores. There were some things that COVID affected, but I was still able to live my normal teenage life that summer. And because of that, I don't think I was mentally prepared for the returning of school that fall for my junior year, but I would not trade that summer for anything. Maybe I had unrealistic expectations for my return to school. Maybe it was my fault because I actually expected the return to be hard. But I know one thing for sure. A part of me changed that school year, and it seemed irreversible. My family saw it in me and did their best to help me, but nothing seemed to work. As an athlete my entire life, I always used my sports ethics game, and I tried to do that. But for the first time in my life, no matter how many line drives I hit off the tee in the batting cage, I was not okay. For the first time in my life, I felt trapped, and no matter how hard I worked at my sport or in the weight room, I couldn't get out. There was a wall that was being built between me and a normal high school career, and it was a sturdy one. The wall came in an extremely small form, a mask. The small piece of fabric was the wall that was put between me and an underclassman I was trying to smile out in the hallway. It was the wall that kept me from mouthing things to my best friend across the room when I probably should have been paying attention in chemistry class. It was the wall that kept me from seeing over half of my teachers' faces. It was the wall that I couldn't break through. The simple piece of fabric caused me to slowly lose the interaction I had with my friends and teachers at school. This small piece of fabric turned me into a whole new person, and I didn't know how to handle it, all because of the disconnection from some of the most important people in my life. I found myself leaving school each day wanting nothing more than to never ever come back. This small piece of fabric made me hate what used to be my favorite place in the world, school. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't the only one struggling. So were my friends around me. We all were feeling some of the exact same emotions that we had never felt before and we did not know how to handle. Personally, I was forced to seek professional help from a therapist, something I had never had to do before. And she taught me a lot. She taught me how to learn to handle the emotions I was feeling and how not to let them get the best of me. But it took time and a lot of patience. Slowly but surely, I made it through. I survived. The last thing I ever expected to say was that I survived my junior year and mean it literally. Because of these emotions, I wished away my junior year. I wished away cheering on my classmates at football games. I wished away the group projects that we didn't get to have because of social distancing. I wished away my junior softball season. I wished away an entire year of high school memories. After the emotional and mental hardship I experienced junior year, I knew I wanted one thing out of my senior year, and that was to be mask-free. All summer, there was talk of possibly returning to school without masks, and this excited me. I would get a normal senior year. No masks, no social distancing, no quarantine. I was ecstatic. The closer school start, the mandates began. I watched the school around me all call Christopher's bluff and go mask optionals, daring him to take away the funding or sports. If you don't know where Effingham High School is, all you need to know is that we are the biggest school in our county by a couple hundred students. Other schools in our county were voting optional, so therefore, I assumed there's hope for my large school, thinking that surely little bitty Diedrich could stand up to the bully, so could we. I attended the school board meeting that August where they would make a decision if we would follow the mandate or cave in and give in. Our school board meeting was packed for a special school board meeting on Monday night. I listened to the parents give facts about how masks don't work and how their kids were affected. It was a beautiful thing to watch all these parents come together for one reason, us kids. Each one of them brought amazing points to our board, but they all were missing one thing, the personal experience. None of them had sat in the desk at DHS and witnessed what I did every single day. So I decided this was God's way of telling me it was my turn. I sat in front of our 7 school board members, some of which I knew personally, and explained to them why going against the mandate was vital to the well-being of the students, which they had promised to uphold. Some of them listened and digested what I said, what I've been ready to do, and some of them refused to even look me in the eye. Little did they know they lit a fire inside me that day that would burn so strongly that nothing would be able to put it out. We lost the battle that day, but I was not determined to lose that war. I lived my senior year to the best of my ability, attended every single football and basketball game possible, and I made some good memories, but it still wasn't senior year as it should be. Fast forward to February of this year. Judge Grish out here in Sangamon County declared that something that we had known for a long time. Governor Pritzker had overstepped his authority with the mask mandate, and the race was on. Once again, I watched schools all around me drop the masks and allow their kids to make the choice on if they wanted to wear them. I attended a school board meeting the Monday following the decisions and hoped Effingham would follow suit. I was presented with the words, "Well, this will be appealed at a higher court, and we won't know the answer for 2 weeks." To which I responded with, "So what? Give me 2 normal weeks of senior year. Give me 1 day. We will take whatever we can get at this point." I went to the school board the next day wearing my mask again, but the fire inside me was still burning. Within the next 48 hours, our school had decided on calling a special school board meeting for that Friday, solely for the purpose to discuss the masks in the classroom. Attempting to not get my hopes up, I decided to attend because unfortunately, I didn't know when to quit. Without wasting my time, the board discussed each member's point of view on the decision, and then voted. February 11th, 2022. 1 month shy of 2 years. Mask-free finally. As the meeting adjourned, the door to the meeting room opens, and in steps Mr. Thomas DeBoer. The man who had made this entire thing possible. Without a second thought, I stood up and turned around and gave him a hug. A man who I had never met in person, only followed on social media, but I knew how much time and effort he had devoted to the decision that was just made in the room that day. And I knew I might not ever get the chance to thank him for that, so I took it that day. When he asked me to speak here tonight, I'll be honest, I didn't hesitate. I don't know why, I instantly responded yes. I think he texted me about 4 a.m. that morning or something. And for some reason I was up at 6, so I responded right away, absolutely sir, I'll be there. When he asked me to speak, I was like, I'll be there. This is something that I'm passionate about. And my parents taught me at a very, very young age that when you're passionate about something, just never stop fighting for it, ever.
Hey, Mom. I saw something. Express what you're feeling right now.
I am very, very proud of her. As a parent, we want to protect our children, and when she stood up in August at the school board meeting, I just immediately, just like this, tears. I can't speak without doing this. My heart is attached to my tear ducts, I guess. So, she said all the things in August that as a parent, I wanted to say to the school board members, but I couldn't. So when the meeting was getting ready to be adjourned, and our board president said, is there anyone else that wants to speak? Her hand shot up. And she spoke from the heart. So we are very, very proud of her. And thank you so much, Mr. DeVore. Thank you.
Now, we just have one more speaker before our illustrious speaker gets up to speak. Terry Martin, he's also a candidate for the 13th Congressional District. I've known Terry now for almost 10 years. Wow, can you believe that, Terry? He's also been with C-SPAN, WAND, is it WAND? Yeah, and he's also the owner of the Illinois Channel, Terry Martin. Hey, wait, I gotta say one thing. Do you guys know that Terry and Regan are opponents and they signed each other's petition? That's right.
You know, here's the thing, Regan is running and she's qualified, and Jess is another candidate and he's running. None of the three of us have been elected office before. We're all qualified, and as is typical, the Republican Party is overloaded with talent that can come to the fore and do the job. We have a room here and a party of fighters. Tom, thank you for what you do. Thank you, the young lady that just spoke. This is what we need, because the challenge to America right now is a diminution of freedom. We are under attack domestically as never before. We never had a Democratic Party in the past. They were going to rewrite the election laws in the middle of the election. We never said that they can come in and they start talking about taking away the Electoral College, doing away with the rules that have been long established in our society, so that, thank God, by the way, for Democrats in the Senate, Joe Manchin, for voting down that bill, because we are under such attack, both financially and internationally. Financially, when George Bush was president, and he became president in 2001, our national debt was at $6 trillion. Today it's at $30 trillion and moving up fast. That is going to destroy the American economy and opportunity for our younger people. We have a generational obligation. I think you can say, well, Terry, why are you running? And by the way, this is my very first speech as a candidate. I just decided last week, after 30 years of being a nonpartisan journalist, I couldn't stand on the sidelines anymore and be nonpartisan. As I tell people, I feel like I'd be watching a 40-year-old drown in the pool. Should I talk about how she's drowning and report on it, or do something about it? I'm jumping in because our society is under attack, and we as Republicans can save it, and we need to save it at the school board level, the county level, and in Congress, and in the Senate. So we all need to take up our arms and get in the fight, because you're going to be fighting for freedom. It's not about Terry Martin. It's not about any of these candidates. It's about preserving for our family and our posterity the same freedoms that we had in our lifetime. People say, why do you want to run? I think, you know, the guys that hit the beaches in Normandy, they didn't want to fight either. They didn't want to leave their comfortable homes and go out and be shot at on the beaches in Normandy. But if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the freedoms we have here today. Americans have always fought. We need to fight again. I'm running on the 13th of Terry Martin. I don't have my website up and all that is yet. I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm going to be creating a Facebook page. But I've been covering, I used to be a Senate producer at C-SPAN. If you watch Fox News and see Chad Kroeger every day and every. Chad was the afternoon Senate producer, I was the morning Senate producer. I came here, I worked for WAND covering the State House, and then Paul Simon and Jim Edgar wanted to C-SPAN for Illinois, so we started the Illinois channel. And I've been covering the issues, so I've known the issues for over 30 years, both at the federal level and the state level. And so, folks, I'll cut it short, but I appreciate the opportunity. Tom, thanks for what you've done. Good work, and it's good to see you. And Riley, good to see you.
Thank you, Terry. We have one more speaker, Mr. Keith Wolfinger. Come on up. You know what? Isn't that what the fight was about all along? Just the parents' choice, the freedom of choice to choose what they wanted. Not so much that the government would mandate it. Keith, the floor is all yours.
Hi. I was kind of just come over and say something. I'm a teacher from the Peoria area. I was at West Charter Academy, and on October 13th or 18th, I was fired for the vaccine and testing mandates that the governor put forward. And I actually didn't find out about my being fired until the 29th. So, all the students in here, you guys are really awesome to watch up here and talk and to see what it is from your perspective, because your perspective and my perspective as a teacher, they're pretty similar. You guys are not alone. So, it's been a few months since that's happened, and then I went and saw Mr. DeBoer talk at a freedom event up north, and it's given me a lot of hope. The last month I've just been finding my voice a little bit more, and Mr. DeBoer has been the person who has inspired that, because I've been watching his videos and his fight that he's doing for all of us, and I'm very gratified for that. So, yeah, I don't have much more to say about that other than I'm a teacher who's been in that position, parents that are fighting for this. There are teachers out here who need your back, and it's nice to see parents that have come out and support. So, thank you.
Mr. Ryan Cunningham.
Guys, before we get started with Ryan, I wanted to let you guys know something. Most of what I do would not be possible without this guy.
That's right.
He's in the background. He does things that people don't see, but I just want you to know when he gets up here to speak, whatever he says, remember, most of what we do is not possible without him. So give him a round of applause.
Thank you for that, Tom. I appreciate that. So I met Tom probably in June, and my wife and I co-founded a parents group called Speaking for Students. My wife is an educator as well, so she's on the front lines fighting this also. Why did we get into this? Well, let me give you a little bit about my background. As an emergency manager, I have a master's thesis in disaster preparedness and what time the government would violate civil liberties in relation to what? A pandemic. And the findings of that thesis was exactly what we're here today saying, that it would be fought in the courts. The only way that this would be fought is in the courts. Because it would take the people standing up, it would take people getting upset, because government would overreach with power because they would become so consumed with that power. And I didn't envision it playing out to the level that it is actually. I did it on a much smaller scale, but what we're seeing today is exactly what I said in the book. So one of my children, they have special needs. My wife parked her car 3 times getting to work last year, dealing with the stresses of getting my kids out the door to school. We have twins. His IEP was violated. He wasn't given his services. The stress on the family units, the stress on the kids is what made me stand up. And when I met Tom in June, which I know Lee Lewis regrets it tonight, he was supposed to come to the Triad School District to be the first to represent the first school district free of charge against SB, and they said no. Well, guess what? They're on the other end of that receiving tonight, because they did not make the right decision, right? So, with all that said, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the kids standing up. At all these board meetings I've been to, hearing those heartfelt stories of the kids is what is changing this society. If it was not for the kids speaking up, I don't think people would listen to us. We're all just adults, and they think we can argue. but the emotion that the kids elicit to each of us is what draws that, even the most cynical of person out and pulls them out of their shell. And just to get a little humor in it, and as we go back to this, me being on some of the task force that put this into play, I did have the pleasure of calling the governor's office, being on the task force, and saying, hey, can someone tell me when phase 6 starts? They had to get on the computer and look. I'm sorry, sir, there is no phase 6. I'm like, I know that. Now, take our kids out of the masks. But getting on to Tom, I met him, and he is truly genuine. Yes, he is up all night, as am I, it's probably a fault of both of ours, working on this tirelessly. I can tell you right now, he does not want to be a politician, but he wants to advocate for each of you. He wants to advocate for the people in the right way, instead of having us having to hire him to advocate for us against the state of Illinois. That is part of the Attorney General's job, to keep this state in check, to keep the governor's powers in check, to keep us and represent our needs and our wants. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next Attorney General.
Thank you very much. I have a tendency to get fired up at these events, but I'm going to keep it a little bit toned down today. I'll do the best I can. I appreciate all the words, and I listen to the kids talk, and it brings perspective to me on how I found myself about a month ago deciding to run for this office. And I don't know if she knows it, but Grace is probably the one that caused me to push me over the edge, and I'll tell you about that. This country that we live in is one of a kind. And I'm not sure that that's something that people that find themselves in political positions, especially those who are privileged like our governor, I'm not sure they appreciate it. Because unless you've lived it, you can't appreciate it. And that's just a human condition. I was at an event in Williamson County a couple of nights ago, and they gave me 3 minutes to talk, and I started laughing. I can't even introduce myself in 3 minutes. But I did. But what I told them is I gave a brief story of how myself, and I think John said it best, I don't talk about myself much, it's just not my nature. But being able to come from nothing, broken home, parents who were flawed, that's okay. You've never been to college before. Nobody in our family had been to college. My mother was a very intelligent lady that was on welfare and did the best she could. My father had his own set of issues. But to be able to come from that environment and say, you know what, if you apply yourself and you work hard, you can move beyond that from which you came. And that is unique to our country, and there's reasons that it's unique. It's based upon the foundational principles that this country was established. And so I was able to go through, again, my parents didn't have any money, I worked full-time, for the most part, full-time being at least 40 hours a week, sometimes 60. Got a degree, graduated, again, first in my class. I don't talk about that much, but it was because I worked hard. It wasn't because I was necessarily the smartest person in the room. But if you apply yourself and you work hard, you can do those things. I became an accountant, believe it or not. That profession was interesting, finding someone like me as an accountant. Nothing against my accounting friends, but it was kind of boring. But it was okay. And I did that for a while, and then, my children's mother, my son Tommy is here. He's almost 19 years old, wants to be a lawyer. They were about 5 years old, and I decided, something's missing in my life. Because I found myself even in the business world advocating for people that couldn't advocate for themselves. And so I decided to go to law school. So I went. My son and his sisters were about 5 years old, and that was quite an adventure. Got out of law school and started working with my partner. And then again, I found myself doing something that I like to do, which is helping people that can't help themselves. And it was mostly business and transactional related. But I had gotten to the point, and again, my son, I wouldn't embarrass him to have him come up here and attest to it, but he'll know what I'm saying. Is what I found myself right before this COVID stuff had started, is I had put my children in a position in life to be able to move on and to not have to worry about the things I worry about, and gave them a head start in life that I didn't have. And again, this country is what allowed me to do that. And so him and his sisters, again, they were juniors in high school. They were doing really well in school. They still did well. I always make the joke that Governor Pritzker had to sign my daughter Allison's All-American Scholar Certificate. He probably hoped he looked at the name and kind of burned him when he had to sign that. But, now they're in college, and I was like, that was always my goal as a young child. When I was Grace's age, I'm like, how can I get myself to the position where my kids have a better life than me? And so then here we come along, and I remember the day vividly. I was out on my farm, working, probably playing on my tractor. I was doing something. And I heard it come across the radio or something that Governor Pritzker had got on television or got on whatever and said, we have this virus, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And kids weren't going to school, and the businesses had to shut down, and it just didn't pass the smell test for me. And so I was like, okay, he's talking about these emergency powers, and I didn't think much of it. And then 2 weeks went by, and all of a sudden, what do we hear? Oh, we got to continue this some more. We're going to have another extension. And I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. And so I started reading the law. It's not very complicated, the law and all of this. To the extent you believe that it's complicated, it's because of the propaganda that you've heard, and not because of really an appreciation of the laws that we're talking about. And I started looking at it, and I got frustrated, and I kept trying to tell myself, stay out of it, because, again, my son probably would have thought, Dad, stay out of it, at least at the beginning. But I just couldn't, because I could see what was going on around me. When you grow up and you move through from, again, my parents were, lower class, and I had moved through, you have an appreciation and a perspective that people like the governor don't have. Because, again, I'm not criticizing his privilege. I'm not envious at all. I actually feel sorry for him. You lose that perspective of what people every day in this country and in this state are trying to do, trying to make a better life for their children, trying to work hard to get ahead. And I saw that under attack. I really did. And so I started looking into it, and I'm like, this is going to be bad for this state. And I started, I had a Facebook account back then, and it was no secret that I was looking for somebody to sue Governor Pritzker. Because I'm like, this is not right. And lo and behold, here comes, at the time, House of Representative Darren Bailey. I didn't know Darren. And he called me, said he had a friend that knew me, and he wanted to talk to me. So I met Darren at my office in Greenville. I probably had on bib overalls and a pair of muck boots and a red, white, and blue bandana, if I recall. And he walks up and he starts laughing. I didn't know he was a farmer or anything about it. And he looks at me and says, "You don't look like a lawyer." And I said, that's a compliment where I come from. And I said, and he introduced himself, and I said, well, you know what? I said, I don't like politicians. And he started laughing, and he said, well, I don't like them either. I said, okay, we'll see. And so we started that, and we filed the case, and it just happened to be that Darren lived in Clay County. And we filed it down there, and again, without going into the nuts and bolts, it had to do with an executive officer's ability to create, call them mandates, put whatever word you want on it, and really start legislating as the executive. And I'm looking around and going, why isn't everybody going, what are you doing? You cannot legislate from the executive branch. It violates the very principles of what we were founded on. And so we filed that case, and we ended up down in God's country in Clay County, Illinois, in front of this judge, Judge Michael McKinney. Judge Michael McKinney. There's talking about that. If you live in the 5th Appellate District, that's your man right there. And I've been in front of Judge McKinney a few times, and I've told him jokingly in the past, I'm not scared of anything. But he intimidates the heck out of me when I'm in his courtroom. And we were in his courtroom, and we argued this stuff, and Judge McKinney issued a ruling that I think ended up getting the most views of anything I've ever showed. It ended up on the Rush Limbaugh show. And it really, and I think the judge and I would agree, it was not extraordinary in our legal analysis, but it was extraordinary in that some judge and a lawyer had the courage to say what everybody else was thinking. And you know what happened after that ruling got entered? Nothing. Nothing. You know why? Because you were all scared. It was May of 2020, 2 months after the governor had issued his first, second, third royal decree. You could call it a royal decree, Your Honor. Nothing happened because people were paralyzed with fear. And it got me thinking at that point in time, boy, we're in for a long road. I knew it then, sure as I knew it as we're standing here today. Because I learned very quickly that the only way to get rid of what we were witnessing is to get the people involved. It took the people, and without them, nothing else mattered. I had a constitutional law professor that told me once, he says, Tom, he says, if in your life the Constitution never comes under attack, he says no branch of government in and of itself will save it. It will only be saved by the people. Because the Constitution is just a document. But it lives and breathes right here in every person. He was right. And it didn't matter what kind of sonnet that Judge McKinney wrote, the people weren't prepared to stand up for what he had written. So nothing happened. And then there we go into the fall of 2020. You all remember that? Your children were going to school. My children would have then been seniors that year. A year behind you, Grace. Or you're in front of you, you were a year behind them. And they, you guys know what they had to deal with. But we helped out some because, they weren't having proms and they weren't having homecomings and all of that stuff. But you know what? We had those at my house. Every one of them. Oh, and the parents that were still on everybody's going to pass away, man, they all just were upset. But I think we had, Tommy, 90-some% of the kids in the school, they were at I've got a big shed and you couldn't fit another teenager in there. I'm telling you.
150 kids were in my shed that night.
How many,
Single one of them got COVID.
How many?
350.
350. So we still had our events, right? But we go into 2020, and for the most part, parents, you acquiesced to the mask on your kids, exclusion of your children from school because their third cousin's brother's ex-sister might have had COVID and you might have been around them. Get out. And Grace, I'm sorry. My grandma's name was Grace, and I called her Gracie. So if I call you that, Gracie, I'm sorry. But your mom's shaking her head, yeah, because Mom, you were probably one of those parents, right? And that's okay. Most parents were that way, man, I can tell you. When we get into the fall, and so the parents were pretty much where the executive branch wanted them to be, compliant. But then you had the small business owners. Any small business owners in here?
Yeah.
Any small business owners in here that they were telling you had to close because the super spreader events were going on?
Yeah.
There we go. We got a couple of you. How many businesses do you think were closed in 2020 by the governor's executive order? Did that executive order close that business because of that document? How many times do you think that happened? Anybody think less than 100? Less than 5? What if I told you 0? Anybody in here would have thought I would say 0? Not one business. Closed because of an executive order. You guys realize an executive order, not you, Judge, I know you know, it has no place in the law as far as an enforcement perspective. You cannot enforce an executive order. If I walk into the judge's courtroom and say, this executive order is being violated, please punish them, it doesn't exist. I had 1,000 business owners across 90 counties. Not one of them were ever closed because of executive order. There were 4 or 5, less than 10, that ended up having to close because of a court order, but not because of the governor's executive actions, but because of some local food ordinance or something of that nature. Oh, Governor, you
Go for the red dot.
So, none of them were because of executive order. But you know what? What worked with those executive orders against you, ma'am? Fear, scare of your license being taken, coercion, intimidation. It worked on most of you, right?
George Orwell, 1984.
I'm familiar with that, son. You're right. And it worked. When clients hired me across the state to help keep their business open, you know what they were getting from me? Courage. That was it. Once I could get businesses to start opening and they realized there was nothing that could happen to them, they were upset because they know that they had been lied to with fear. So we roll around into 2021. Come into the summer, Grace talked about it well. Schools now, masks. You know what wasn't going on in 2021 when, again, this virus has its ebbs and flows because any virus does. And I would humbly suggest to you that these mitigations had no impact on the increase or decrease in positivity. It's not that simple. Mr. Cunningham told you about we have a pandemic response plan in the state of Illinois. It's 120-some pages long. You familiar with that, sir? Do you realize that pandemic response plan says that the mitigations that the governor is using are actually not favored because they're ineffective at controlling the spread of an infectious disease? They didn't listen to their own plan. But coming into the fall of 2021, guess what we weren't talking about anymore? Small business owners. Do you know why? Because they weren't having it anymore. The governor and his minions knew that they could no longer push the small business owners across the state anymore. The jig was up. And so they didn't talk about it. When the positivity went up, you guys all remember that in 2020, well, we got to get below 8% positivity. If we get below 8% positivity, we'll go to phase 63.85 or whatever it was. Positivity went back up over 8% in 2021. It was in double digits. Did you hear anything about putting the mitigations back in place for the small business owners? No! Do you think that the transmission of this virus, however it transmits, changed from 2020 to 2021? Of course not. It was all a facade. It was all a fiction, and I knew it. And I just had to convince you guys of it. So we get into the fall of 2021, and kids are going back to school like Grace. And do you all know that in the fall of 2020, we also tried to push the mask issue for kids in school to keep the masks off kids? Didn't you even know we tried it a year earlier? Got one young man who does. You didn't even know, did you? And we didn't win. We actually lost that argument in front of Judge Rishow in August of 2020. Because you guys weren't ready, and I knew it. But oh, you come to the fall of 2021, you were all ready then, didn't you? You were fired up. You know who was fired up? The mamas. You dudes in this room? The mamas and their kids made this happen, I promise you. I talked to most of them. So you dads, sorry, beat me up. It wasn't you. Because in the fall, or in August of 2021, when the governor issued that mandate, I saw the difference across the state. I could feel it. And I'm like, okay, here they come. They had enough. And so we started working in August, and we had cases in Southern Illinois that we had filed. And guess what we were talking about? Due process of law. You can't engage in arbitrary and capricious actions as an executive branch. You know who talked about the same due process and arbitrary and capricious activities in May of 2020? That man sitting back there. Now we're here a year and a few months later, and people starting to change, right? They had enough. And so the Illinois Department of Public Health made a mistake. Even though the governor issued his executive order on August 4th, the Illinois Department of Health put out their guidance. You guys remember their guidance? You know what they put in that guidance? The law. That was the law. They never literally put the law in their guidance, and I used it against them. And so we started winning cases across southern part of the state because I saw the suffering that was going on with the children. I was fortunate, my kids were good students. They had a good home. They were, blessed that we were able to provide that. But I knew those children that came from homes that were struggling. I knew what they were going through because guess what? 30-some years prior to that, that was me. I wanted to go to school because I needed to be away from what I was dealing with. I knew the kids that were struggling that couldn't be seen. And so we started winning those cases because the judges were saying that due process carries the day. So what Governor Pritzker tried to do on September 17th, 2021, he tried to play games with his executive orders, changing the basis of which the courts were relying upon before we got into Sangamon County. It didn't work for him. You know why it didn't work for him? One, because he was not following the law, which he's never been. But two, the people weren't fooled anymore. You guys weren't fooled. They didn't go away. Hundreds and hundreds of parents got together and asked me to be their voice against 146 school districts. That's what got their attention. Right? That got the attention of everybody in the state, including, and I'm going to say it, including the mainstream media that for the most part had not been reporting accurately on these issues for months and years. They hadn't. And so we get to February 4th, and Judge Grishow issues her ruling. Most of you maybe read it. Her ruling, not substantively different from a legal analysis perspective than what that man said in May of 2020. But you know what the difference was? You guys were off to the races. You were off to the races, and in the weekend after she issued that ruling, 200 plus school districts in the state went fully mask optional. Her court ruling never had anything to do with that. Nothing to do with it. I'll say that again. Her ruling did not say that one school district was required from that court order to go to mask optional. 200 plus of them did. By the end of the next week, I think we were pushing 500 plus. That's what made the difference. All of you, this young lady right here, going to board meetings and pushing what was right. And you had a judge that wrote what was right. She said in her ruling the evil that the law was intended to protect the people of this state against. And that was the governor and his administrative agency's actions. That's what did it. It was all of you. And so here I was, right before that ruling got issued, I had decided for my own reasons to run for the appellate court in the 5th Appellate District, which is the lower 48 counties, Judge, pretty much. Running in that race, not because of similar reasons that I'm running for the Attorney General. In that race, it was what I thought worked for my life at the time. That man sitting back there is by far the most experienced and qualified person for that position in the southern part of the state, and I will do everything I can to help him. But once that ruling got issued, I started getting emails, videos from parents across the state. I got one, I remember this little girl, she couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. And she walked into her school, it was one of them that had not yet changed to go mask optional. And she walked in the door, her mom was recording her, and she says, I'm here, I don't have a mask on, and I'm not leaving because I got rights that you can't violate. You believe that? I started crying right. Can you imagine the courage of a child, that little, walking in there and doing that? And I'm here to tell you, most of the adults in this room don't have that courage. You don't. And I saw that. And then I saw this young lady sitting here that just spoke to you, Grace. I saw what she was doing and the emotions that she had, trying to fight for what she thought was right. And I said to myself, I'm like, if I get elected to the appellate court, if I would have by some chance beat who was obviously the most experienced and seasoned judge for that position, Judge McCady, again, I'm going to keep saying the judge over and over. But if I would have, I'm like, what do I do then? What do I do when the next emergency comes? Because I promise each and every one of you, as sure as I'm standing here, another one's coming, and it may not even be a virus. Because by the very nature of government, there is a tendency for it to accumulate to the executive branch if we don't stop it. Do you all realize that for thousands and thousands of years, we were ruled that way? Right? Do you guys understand that part of our history? That's within our DNA, is that we're ruled. We're ruled by the sword for thousands of years. We're civilized people now. It's not a sword. But what is it? Your license. Right? It's the same type of sword. Threatening your livelihood. Not threatening your life, but your livelihood. That's what was happening. It was a regression back to that. Mr. Cunningham talked about it. He's familiar too. How could I sit on the appellate court and help with that? It would have been tough for me because I know it's coming, right? I'm not even convinced as we sit here today, and you guys have heard the governor on TV about, oh, the Supreme Court said that, I'm everything I was doing. You heard him, and I'm laughing going, that's not even what the court said. But he's trying to condition people already to believe that what he was doing, the courts found to be proper. It's not true. What they found he was doing was improper. But I know those games could be coming. I know we could be back in this in the fall. And I'm like, what can I do to stop that? And I only thought of one way that I could. John's right. I don't have any desire to be in politics. Does that make me a good candidate or a bad one? I don't know. But it's not something that I wanted to do. I watch politicians that have a desire to be in those positions, and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with them, because being in those positions is all responsibility if you do it right. There's no authority. It's 100% responsibility. And I'm like, I don't know if I want that responsibility. But I thought to myself, I don't have a choice, because if it's coming back again in this state, which I believe it is, the only chance I would have to try to put an end to that would be in the Attorney General's position. Because I promise each and every one of you, I don't care who the governor of the state is, Republican or Democrat, if they try to do that again, they will have, let me try to say that, Gracie, I was going to start cussing. They're going to have trouble, I can tell you that right now, because I will sue them into oblivion. They will not be going to the Attorney General's office saying, please file a cause of action against the people of this state, which is what we've been seeing. I'll be saying, Governor, I'll see you in court. I promise you. Two simple rules. The people are always right.
Where to go?
Second rule, if you think the people are wrong, refer back to rule number 1. They're always right. Because what is government? It's the people. You guys understand that? Because again, I want to go back to the human condition. We can lose sight of the fact that this country, 200 some years ago, consent of the government. The government has no power. They have none. Unless you let them have it. That appearance of power is what controls you, not power. And as an Attorney General, I would make sure that happens. I would say, if you're going to have, for example, a mask for kids in schools, if the legislative branch of the government, your elected representatives want to pass a law that says during times of a disaster, let's hypothetically say we have it, kids have to wear masks in school for some amount of time. If the legislature wants to pass that, okay, we can unelect it, right? But when an executive officer says he's going to do that, I'm not breathing. It ain't going to work because we're destroying the fabric of what we're all about.
Right.
Next thing is, I hear you all say, corruption in the state. My friend John talks about it all the time. What do we see in the media? Mr. Madigan, he's gone. It's corruption that they talk about. Mr. Cullerton, now, he's another one. Who's doing that? The federal prosecutors are the ones taking the corruption down in our state.
Right.
Not us. Second thing, I promise you, corrupt politicians will not have the same limit in the state of Illinois if you put me in that seat. I'll fare them hard. I don't care who likes it, Republican or Democrat. If you're harming the people of this state, you're going to deal with the Attorney General's office.
Right.
And I'll tell people clearly, if you don't think that's best for this position, then it's okay. Vote for the other guy. I'm going to tell you what I'll do, and if you think that's best, then that's great. Next thing is, I don't care what position you've held for the last 2 years, from the highest office in the state, you all know who that is, to the lowest. If you have done things violating the civil rights of people over the last 2 years, the grand jury is going to decide whether or not you should be held to account for that. All of you. We still got school districts, not as many, but we still got school districts right now making kids wear masks in school. Even after the judge said it's violating their constitutional rights and statutory rights due process. That's a civil rights violation. Some of them are still doing it. You know, it was a bad thing. I'll leave you guys with this. I always knew when the governor started doing the things he was doing that there's a problem that others below him see that going on too. And they absorb that. Oh, if he's getting away with doing what he thinks is right because he's helping keep us safe, all other branches of government will start mocking that, going, I'm trying to keep you safe. Where do we have a problem with that? They're like, they look at you in dismay, like, why are you complaining? I'm doing what's right to keep you safe. And I'm sorry, I'll take my chances with a virus before I'll take my chances with you destroying the foundational principles of what this government is founded to be. Because the chances of us destroying this nation is exponentially greater if we erode those foundational principles than any virus. And I'll give you this. How many of you in this room, I'll give you an example, how many of you in this room disagree with Governor Pritzker's mask mandate on kids in schools? How many? Judge, you're going to already know where we're going with this. How many of you in here love Governor DeSantis' executive order that says you can't make a kid wear a mask in school? How many? Judge? You know what? I hold them both equally in this game. Because when you're willing to accept the mean or the ends that you like and the means don't matter anymore, we've all lost. Hold on. Because I personally love what Governor DeSantis did. Take those masks off those kids. But you know what? I'm not willing to abandon the separation of powers and the processes of our government, because executive orders on those types of subjects are not allowed. They are beyond the authority of the executive, regardless of whether or not that result is something you personally believe or not. You always have to stand for the rule of law, and it will always be the right thing. If we don't get the result that we like, we change the law. We don't disregard the process. Does that make sense, you guys? We have to insist on the Attorney General like they do that. So I'm going to be asking for your vote in the primary, asking for your vote in the general election if I win the primary, and I promise each and every one of you, we roll into the fall in November, and I'm the Attorney General. Don't worry about the mandates anymore against your businesses, against your kids, against anybody, because I will not let it happen. I promise you. Thank you.